Promises. We're going to talk about promises today. Promises shape our lives. We use different names for that word. We don't always say the word promises. Sometimes we call them vows or contracts or leases. But most of the significant moments in our lives involve some kind of a promise, some kind of a covenant, some kind of agreement that is made. Both our greatest joys and our deepest pains often are surrounded among promises made or promises broken. Likewise, in matters of faith, it is trust in promises. Promises like, "Lo, I will be with you always." That gives us hope, encouragement, strength, get through difficult times. Next 3 months, we're going to trace our way through the Old Testament. We're going to be following our timeline here. We talked about the story of Noah last week. Today, we're talking about Abraham. The narrative, this overarching story, is going to be that of promises. Promises made, kept, threatened, and renewed. To help us think about this a little bit, I'm going to show just part of a little video clip that talks about promises, or they use the word covenant from this Bible project that helps frame this overall picture. So a little thing just to get us thinking here.
If you've been around Christians, you've probably heard of the idea of having a personal relationship with God, which could mean different things in the Bible, like having God as a friend, or your father, or maybe your teacher.
But there's one particular way that the Bible talks about this relationship that you find all over. But strangely, we don't talk about it that much. And that's the idea of a partnership with God.
A partnership like working alongside someone to accomplish a goal together.
Right, and this is actually what you see at the beginning of the Bible. God creates this good world full of all of this potential. And then God appoints these unique creatures, humans, as his partners in bringing more and more goodness out of all that potential.
But the humans don't want to partner with God. They rebel and try to create a world on their own terms.
And so this broken partnership is the Bible's explanation for why we're stuck in a world of corruption and injustice and the tragedy of death.
It's not like there's just one or two humans who have bailed on this relationship. In the story of the Bible, everyone has abandoned the partnership with God.
So what God does is select a smaller group of people out of the many, and he makes a new partnership with them called a covenant. And in a covenant, God makes promises, and then in exchange asks his partner to fulfill certain commitments. And the purpose of all of this is to somehow use this covenant relationship to renew his partnership with everybody else.
Now, there are actually 4 times in the Old Testament that we're told God initiates a covenant relationship with Noah, Abraham, the nation of Israel, and King David.
And it's through these that God is forming a covenant family into which all people will eventually be invited.
So let's see how these work. The first one is with Noah.
So in this story, God has just brought the flood to cleanse the world of humanity's corruption, and Noah and his family are the only ones left. And so God makes a covenant with Noah, saying, "Listen, I know that humans will continue to be evil, but despite that, I'm not going to destroy it like this again. Instead, the earth will be this reliable place for us to work together."
Great. So what does Noah have to do?
Nothing. And that's what's so interesting about this first covenant, is that God is promising to be faithful, even though he knows humans won't be.
The next time we see God make a covenant is with a man named Abraham. God chooses him, promises to bless him, give him a large family, lots of land where they can flourish.
And in return, God asks Abraham to trust him and train up his family to do what is right and just. And the whole reason for this covenant is God says that somehow he's going to bring his blessing to all families of the world through this one family.
So that's Abraham.
All right, so we'll pick up the others as we move the story along. But that just to catch us up a little bit on the story. So just again, like last week, we talked about this first covenant, this covenant with Noah, the story of recreation. After the flood, it was this fresh start to this world that had been corrupted by sin. And the sign of the promise was this rainbow, right? Sin will not be dealt with by violence. Sin will be dealt with by grace and mercy. Promise not made just to Noah, but a promise made to all of creation. It's about as big a promise as you can get. So we continue through the book of Genesis. The promise comes into more focus, goes from a promise to all creation, again down to a single individual named Abram. Promise claimed by 3 major religions, all right? And this is the promise. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your country your family, your relatives. Go to the land that I will show you, and I will bless you. Make your descendants into a great nation. You will become famous and a blessing to others. I will bless anyone who blesses you. I will put a curse on anyone who puts a curse on you, and everyone on earth will be blessed because of you. Abram was 75 years old when the Lord told him to leave the city of Haran. And he obeyed and left with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the possessions and slaves they had gotten while in Haran. All right, this threefold promise, right? I will give you a land, I will make of you a great nation with many descendants, and through you the whole world will be blessed. We're going to hear this promise a number of times and see this promise being sorely tested. But Abraham believes the promise, and he goes. His mission, to explore new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one had gone before. No, that's Star Trek. But it was to go to a place he did not know, all right? To a place he'd never been before, to discover what God maybe had in place for him. Was trusting simply in a promise. There's issues that make the promise seem unlikely. This new land he was going to already had inhabitants. It wasn't a wilderness waiting to be tamed. It was a place where people lived. And Abraham was already old, and his wife was barren, so descendants seemed quite unlikely. And how could everyone on earth be blessed by the actions of one person? An unlikely promise. Part of me doesn't like this part of the story. It seems like God is picking favorites. Picking one person is bound to create problems. But then I realize that God doesn't pick Abraham because he's so special, because he's so wonderful. It's a theme we're going to see again and again all the way through the story. God choosing the unlikely and the unqualified, right, to do his tasks for him. The book of Genesis is a story about a deeply dysfunctional family, right, and badly in need of therapy. And it doesn't get any better as we work our way through the Bible. Again and again, God chooses these unlikely, unqualified people, I think on purpose, so we don't get the idea that somehow we get blessings because we earn them, right? God chooses broken people to say, my blessings are coming to you as pure grace. Abraham didn't deserve the blessing, right? He was already rich. He didn't need stuff. He had everything money could buy. He had a home. He had a land. By the age of 75, he probably had come to terms with not being a dad. Again, I don't think God chose Abraham because he was special, maybe in spite of who he was. But this isn't about Abraham, and that's the thing. This is a story about God and the ultimate goal to bless all of creation. So how's that going? Right? Abraham never got to see the promise fulfilled. The only land he ever owned in the promised land was a cemetery plot. Right? The descendants of Abraham's promise, the Jews and Christians and Muslims, have not gotten along particularly well together. The piece of land has been fought over for centuries, with atrocious things being done in God's name. It's been soaked in blood with no end in sight. I mean, did I miss the blessing somewhere here? I mean, the sin thing didn't get washed away with the flood. It has found numerous ways to express itself, trying to nullify this promise that God has made. So the question rises, is the promise still good? Will the whole of creation somehow be blessed? Some have given up, have rejected the whole idea. And it's hard to blame them when we see how badly we have behaved. But this really isn't about us and our failures. It's about, in the midst of a darkness, there remains a light. There remains hope. And it all gets tied up in this person of Jesus. Not as a spokesperson for one particular religion over another one, but as an expression of love and grace in a crazy, mixed up world. A love that has the power to redeem, to reconcile, to heal the brokenness, a love that's not ready to give up. For a while, I gave up watching the news. I just couldn't even turn it on anymore, but you can't get away from it. All this brokenness. But then because I realized that, all this brokenness that happens around us is what God loves, and God has not given up on us. It's to this world that God sent his Son to save, that there is light, that there is hope. And so we can't give up on it. Every once in a while I get these little glimpses of hope, and just in little things. The other day saw it somewhere, there was a Dunkin' Donut off the turnpike in Connecticut. About 7 a.m., someone pulls in and decides, I'm not just going to pay for my own coffee, I'm going to pay for the person behind me, and pays it forward to do that. Happens occasionally, these sort of random acts of kindness, but on this particular day, 10 days ago, it triggered a chain reaction that lasted 3.5 hours. Everyone who came through that line, because someone had paid for theirs, paid for the person behind them. Just a little thing. It's not a big life-changing thing, but it's one of those things that reminds me there is goodness, there is compassion, there is love, there's concern for others in our world. It's people who are blessed who turned around to recognize, I've been blessed, I can be a blessing to someone else. When Diane and I were in Malawi, we met a man. I told you about him right after we came back. His name is Patso. And he's one who grew up in poverty as an orphan, but someone befriended him, helped him get some education, and he's doing well now. He's broken the cycle of poverty. And he could simply live comfortably if he wanted to, but instead he recognized that he had been blessed, and therefore he's going to use his life to be a blessing for others. And created this foundation called Masamfenia, which simply means vision. It's talking, and he recognized that these underprivileged women and girls are very vulnerable. He says, I need to do something to help them. And so it started small. 8 people he was going to help with microloans and teach them and how to be more independent and help them to work. And now it's grown, to dozens of these women and girls, teaching them life skills, how to break out of this cycle, teaching them how to irrigate during a dry season so that they can grow crops year-round, using treadle pumps to raise water from wells, producing a crop and diversifying so they have varieties of foods in which they can eat. And he is able to do this because of a woman up in Cameron, Wisconsin, who said, I've been blessed. I want to be a blessing. Let me pay a salary for you so you can spend your time helping others. Her name's Ann Knutson. She's a potter. You may have seen her stuff if you go to craft shows around here, does stoneware. And she's going to be with us in 2 weeks. And I invited Ann to come and sort of share her story as well of what does it mean for someone to have been blessed to turn around and be a blessing for others. This is what gives me hope. I see these examples all around us in small and big ways, being blessed to be a blessing. Let's sing a song.